Today we talk about Xenoshyft, a sci-fi game by Cool Mini or not, but it's not a game with miniatures. Actually, it is a card game. It is a cooperative deck building game. Now, we have had a few in the last couple of years, like the legendary games. This one, however, feels different, for example, from the legendary games. But the idea is that you are controlling a group of soldiers, Starship Trooper type of soldiers, and you are defending your base, your sci-fi base, against an ugly army of incredibly disturbing and bizarre monsters that are attacking you from all directions. And you have, as a single player, the job of defending a specific area. The game can be played solitary, works well that way, or it can be played by multiple players. Then each player is playing to defend a specific area, but it's still not multiplayer solo. There definitely is synergy among the players. Let me show you how the game works. The game is played on, or I should say around, these two boards that really are just meant to organize the cards, and they're not all that well designed because you can see they're very small, meaning there is minimal space between the slots where the cards need to be placed. So after a while that you start pulling cards, it gets a little messy. It would have been much better, these boards would have been much more practical if there had been more room between the stacks of cards. But this is how you organize them. If you organize them more or less like this, you don't even need those boards. But it is useful also to have them because actually here you have a turn track, or I should say a round track. The purpose of the game is to survive until the end of round 9, and at that point to still have a base. Your base, or I should say the strength of the base, is represented by this player aid here. It has dials that you use to adjust the number of hit points, health points, call them whatever you want, that your base has. When an enemy hits the base, then you simply reduce the count on these dials. And if the base goes down to having 0 points, then you have lost the game. Each player also has one of these boards here, which you pull it in front of yourself, and adjacent to it you place this other board here, which is the area where your enemies will line up to try to attack you. Basically, each player is defending a section of the base, so this is the area of your section where you put your people, and the people that are here will have to defend against the monsters that are coming from here. Also, as you can see from the turn track, it is divided in 3 areas of slightly different colors: yellow, orange, and red. Well, yellow is different, but these ones not all that different. Each wave corresponds to a deck that the ugly monsters you are facing will come from. Wave 2, for example. Then we also have wave 3. Of course, the higher the wave, the nastier the monsters, but also the higher the wave, the better the cards that you can have access to. Each player has a starting deck, and the composition of the deck may change slightly from player to player because there may be different cards that you may have in your initial deck depending on the section of the base. Your section of the base is always represented by this board here, which has 4 slots, but then what that corresponds to in the geography of the base is determined by one of these cards. You assign one of them randomly to each player at the beginning of the game. Oh, you cheat and you choose yours. Is there any rule against that? Probably, but the essence of cheating is that you don't follow the rules. So each section has specific abilities and bonuses that you will get depending on what it is that you're controlling. For example, if you are controlling the command center, then at the beginning of the game you add 2 available item cards with a cost of 3 or less, and then each other wave you kind of like unlock a further advantage. Weapon research: weapons will cost less than for other players to purchase. Similar things that reduce the cost, for example, of medical supplies, of technologies, things like that. So you have your initial deck of cards, you shuffle them like in every deck game out there, And then, well, you're ready to start the game. Actually, to be accurate, before you start the game, you need to set it up, and this area will always be the same, representing the soldiers that are available to you. These are available from the beginning, these guys, these 3 guys from wave 2, and these guys from wave 3. These are the area which represents the items that you're purchasing, has small decks representing, well, the items that comes out of a larger deck of decks. That is, there are a lot of items, each represented by a small deck of cards, like you have the medbot, the booster injection, grenades, weapons, plasma, shotgun. At the beginning of the game, you select or you randomly draw 9 that you place there, and that represents the things that are actually purchasable this turn, or I should say this game, because each game you will have different things that you can get. So what happens? At the beginning of each turn, you draw cards from your deck up to a hand of 6 cards, and this part is done simultaneously by all players. This is actually something I like very much about this game. If you're playing multiplayer, because you can play it solo, it works well. If you play multiplayer, there is a long part of the turn, a big part of the turn, where players can act at the same time. However, since it is cooperative, you still want to pay attention to what other players are doing, and so there can be conversation and discussion there to decide how to do things in that phase. So you draw cards until you have a hand of 6 cards. Then you acquire a resource from one of these decks. In wave 1, you get a card from this deck here, this for wave 2, this for wave 3. These cards that are yellow and have a number here simply represent the resources, the currency that you use to purchase stuff here on the board. And there also are other effects that may be unlocked starting from the following waves, from wave 2, and these ones from wave 3. As you can see, the value gets higher, so that as the game proceeds, each turn you will get better resources that go in your deck, because you do need to purchase pretty heavy stuff to fight increasingly harder monsters that are attacking you. So you draw your cards, you get a new card, and then you get to purchase cards also. And that is when you spend whatever cards that you have in your hand at that turn to acquire things. And you can get as many as you want. The cost for the equipment that you're purchasing, or the people that you're recruiting, is there. And let's have a look at some of the cards. For soldiers, well, the cost is here. You can always get a free militia, which are the grunts and which are the standard unit. They're not very powerful, but better than nothing to fill up slots on your board if you don't have anybody else. So we have the cost, then we have the firepower or the combat power, the attack power, call it whatever you like, number of hit points or health points. When it goes down to 0, the unit is dead, and you use markers to indicate the number of ones that a soldier takes when it takes once but is not dead yet. Also, soldiers, most of them at least, will have special powers and abilities, and then simply the text will tell you what that power or ability is. The paratroopers, for example, are particularly mobile. They can be added to your board at a later turn. The paramedic can prevent damage, this kind of thing. And then here you have some very heavy hitters, some very nasty heavily armored soldiers. So you purchase a mix of soldiers, most likely, and equipment, maybe weapons, which also have a firepower or an attack power, and all items have an explanation of what they do, symbols to indicate the category or categories the item belongs to, in case there are game effects that affect them. For example, if you have a discount to purchase weapons, then this is a card that the discount applies to. And then, again, most important, game effects. So you will assign your items to your soldiers, simply adding together the firepower to the standard firepower or the defense power if it's an item that gives you defensive power, or they may be just cards that you play, you resolve the effect, and then you discard them. Cards with the symbol here, they're instant cards. They can be played. They can be played during the reveal phase, that is when the enemies that are on your enemy board are revealed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're still at the beginning of the turn when you have acquired new money to spend. You're using also the money that you have in your hand from your draw, and you're purchasing stuff. Very important, the cards that you purchase don't go in your deck, they go immediately in your hand. You can use them right there, which is very refreshing. I like that very much. Then, once all players have acquired the new cards, and they do that together, but remember, you need to talk and to communicate with your friends if you want to have a chance of survival. Then players deploy their cards. They deploy cards from their hand onto their board. It is really a good idea to have at least a soldier for each slot. And if you have weapons and if you have equipment you want to attach, this is the time to do so. I'm going a little randomly here, just to give you a sense of how units may look. Let's give this guy a classic old-fashioned chainsaw. It may be a sci-fi universe, but chainsaws never go out of fashion. So maybe your board at the end of the deploy phase will look a little bit like this, but then remember you also have another board, which is this one. And then you will add enemies there. Enemies come out of the deck that you're using for your wave, and you need to draw 4 if your board is empty at that point. There may still be enemies from the previous turn. Each player places all of their cards there at the same time, face down. Revealing cards is part of the combat phase, and there are a lot of game effects that work around there. What happens here? Then, one player at a time, this is when the game starts becoming not simultaneous but sequential, one player at a time starts resolving the attacks. What you do is you simply reveal the first card, which indicates the monster that the first soldier in your line of defense has to fight. And this is the time when you or other players also may play instant cards that may affect the situation. Maybe they'll be able to immediately defeat this guy, send it somewhere else, weaken it, give other abilities to your player. A lot of different things may happen there. What is interesting is that, so you can play cards to help other players, and when you do so, when then the cards are discarded, they go in the deck of the player that received it. So basically you're gifting your cards to other people. The cards may travel around decks wildly, which is something very unusual in deck building games. So it's awesome on one hand. On the other hand, you have to be careful that you're not giving all of your strength to one single player, because then you're gonna have another area, which is the one protected by the player that gave away all of their cards, that is going to be weak. So you still need to retain some form of balance even as you're trading, gifting, receiving cards. So reveal the monster, everybody gets a chance of playing cards to affect the upcoming combat, and then you finally resolve the combat. Combat is simplicity itself. Once you have all the factors involved, it is really mechanical, which is each of the participants to the combat, in this case these two people, basically the leftmost and the rightmost cards on the hero board and on the monster board, they inflict damage to each other equal to their firepower, equal to their attack power. This guy inflicts 1 point of damage on the ranger, who is fine, has a lot of defense yet, and the ranger inflicts 2 points of damage to the Corpse Eater. Well, they're still both alive, so what happens? They repeat the sequence. The Corpse Eater attacks the guy again, and this is the guy inflicts 2 more hits, which are sufficient to kill that monster. However, you look at the effect of the card that says the first time this enemy would be killed, instead place it at the end of the enemy lane and heal it to 1 health point. So we put 2 markers to indicate it only has 1 left point, and we put it all the way to the left, so it'll come back. Then we slide cards and we repeat. reveal. Does anybody want to play any cards? Yes, no, whatever, we'll do that. And then we will resolve combats and we'll keep fighting. So as enemies are killed, they go down, they're removed, and the remaining enemies slide down. And of course, also your people will get killed when they go down to 0. And once some people are killed, the remaining ones slide down. As you keep resolving, again, it can be a little mechanicistic, but luckily enough for the players, even though they are not, it's not their turn, they're watching what you're doing, so you get a chance of interacting by playing cards. So the downtime is not really a factor that is too concerning. You keep repeating until basically allows either your board will be empty or theirs will be. Their board is empty and yours is not. Then you effectively defended. Good for you. The enemies did not go through your line of defense this round of combat, this round of the game. It can be, alas, the other way around. That is, there are, at the end, still monsters there, maybe multiple ones, maybe even unrevealed ones, that are still there when you don't have any defenders. In which case, the ones that are still there will be revealed. There's a chance of playing cards that may affect them. But at the end, when all is said and done, if there are monsters in the monster area and there are no defenders, then the damage that they would inflict on the defenders is inflicted on the base instead. This is the game, really. I mean, after everybody went through their combat phase, you had the wrap-up phase of each turn, but that is not the biggest part at this point. Once everybody went, you simply go to the next turn. Remember, every 3 turns you will get a new wave, which will get you worse monsters. There really is a nasty assortment of baddies here, and the art is pretty neat. The art is very evocative, is very effective. Just to show you some more of these nasty monsters. So you go through all waves for as long as possible until your base is entirely destroyed, in which case you lose the game. Or if you manage to survive for 9 entire rounds, then you and possibly your team win the game. I said you and possibly your team because, again, you don't have to play in a team. You can play alone as a solitaire game, and you can choose to use any number of boards, even if you're playing by yourself. Do I like this game? Yes, I do like it. I enjoyed playing it. Is it a good game? I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. I would say it's a mess. It's a mess of a game, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's a mess that I enjoy. How so? The messiness comes from the immense number of game effects that you have to know, which also means the first game or two will be pretty painful because you will spend a lot of time reading the rules, reading the effects of the equipment, the soldiers, the monsters. And every time that you will introduce the game to somebody else, otherwise you will be the alpha player, just telling everybody what to do, or you will have to sit back and patiently wait for the new players to become familiar with the effects and figure out their strategy. So it's a mess just to learn all of those effects, and then of course to keep them all in mind. When you have multiple players with each player with their boards with 4 monsters there, or in any case multiple monsters revealed, each player has 6-7 cards on their board because of the cards that are equipped to your standard 4 soldiers, more cards in everybody's hands that they are thinking about possibly using. That's a lot of things that you have to take into account. So if you're trying to play optimally, like really objectively find the best course of action under all circumstances, the game is gonna be a pain to play. And maybe this is kind of the idea, actually. It's a game that is impossible to play optimally in each round, in each situation. So it is supposed to encourage you to follow the force, use the force, listen to your guts, jump off a cliff and find your wings as you fall. Something like that, kind of like, let it go. But if you do have a player that wants to play at the possible best of all available resources, then that player can bog down the game a little bit. Lucky enough, the game can be played solo, so in that case, you simply lend the game to that player. So you spend all day building your own little algorithm, and you'll be happy that way. We're gonna play something else, or we just a copy, something like that. So you kind of need to have players that are in the same mindset to follow the story, follow the adventure, and not to obsess about details too much. Not obsessing about details may also be a good thing, because there are a lot of ambiguities that arise from the effects and the abilities and the skills and the limitations. The timing in particular can be tricky. There are some ambiguities here and there in the nomenclature, in the way words are used. The meaning of combat can be a little tricky. The reveal phase, a lot of stuff may happen during the reveal phase. The rulebook says that you choose whichever order you want, but sometimes you just feel like the cards really seem to say that I should do this and this and that, most likely. So you will try to puzzle out, ferret out the details considerably. There are just some ambiguities, and you will have to make your decisions. So again, if you want a game that is polished, neat, out of the box, maybe a Euro game would work better. This is not one such game. I've read online problems about the scale of the game that can be very difficult or very hard depending on the number of players that you have. I never found that to be a problem, in particular because I'm talking about in general, because the level of difficulty in most games can be adjusted so easily. In this case, simply have less resources, do not unlock certain soldiers until later than they would otherwise, play an extra round, get less resources, add more monsters to everybody's board. I just think that there are so many ways of tweaking the difficulty if it is too hard or too easy, that I don't find that to be a particular problem. As is the challenge in many cases is good, is about right, by which I mean it has to be tough, otherwise there is no point in playing the game. I like the pace of the game with an alternating of phases of the turn in which everybody acts at the same time, and then where people act individually but other people are still involved because they're still having a close look at what happens. And really the two twists to the traditional deck engine game, the fact that you get cards in your hand immediately, reminds me of a game I played 2 years ago, Kanzumi Goddess, where the new cards go on top of your deck. That is unusual, but cards that you can then use immediately, and the fact that cards travel around. That to me opens up an entire different range of possibilities, which again you have to embrace and love, not to overanalyze if you don't want to kill the potential fun that comes from it. So is this a good game? I don't know. I think this is a game that a lot of people would really not like because of the messiness, because of the chaos. But if you like the theme, definitely the game expresses that very well. It is a brutal, bloody battle where you can see stuff blowing up in your head. You can really see these over-the-top weapons, these ugly over-the-top monsters, really scary and disturbing. It is really sort of like Starship Troopers feel. Even more the movie, I would say, than the book. I prefer the book, but the movie has its own spectacular quality if it's not particularly strong on plot. And here it's something similar. It's not that the plot is an overarching, beautiful progression. It is a sequence of increasingly bloody and spectacular fights. And as such, it works. It can be a little slow at the beginning, again, because of the reading aspect of getting to know all the cards and the effects, and because of that, I guess probably the first game or two may be underwhelming, because then the game will be very long and you will feel like it's the same repetition of the same round over and over again. give this game a couple of tries, because once you become familiar, then you can play it and faster, and you can keep a certain rhythm, a certain pace, and then you can see the progression. Then you can see the monsters becoming bigger as you are grabbing better equipment, as you are recruiting tougher soldiers, and the battle becomes more interesting. You do have to play with enough of a pace, enough of a good rhythm to see the progression for the game not to feel repetitive. Xenoshyft Onslaught by Cool Mini or No, a soloable cooperative deck building game, which is fun to play, but again, for the nth time, it has a messy quality to it that I don't think everybody will enjoy. And before I forget, I want to thank 5 viewers of my videos that backed my Kickstarter campaign for 2015. They are Bjorn, Eriksson, Hans, Olaf, Arnang, Michelle, Journet, Stein, Surland, and Tony Crown. Thank you for backing my Kickstarter campaign, to the 5 of you, and thank you to all of you, my viewers, for watching my videos.